Hello and welcome to our daily news analysis. So you're watching a channel IASPrimers, which always has questions for mains answer writing practice. Now before going forward, we have a mentorship program, and if you are interested, you can check the comment section where I have a Google form and the details of that program is mentioned over here. Right. Now let's get on with today's news. So first of all, we have the front page overview. So in Hindu, what we see is that more or less every single news is covered in the front page. So that we'll do in brief. Then, Rabindranath Tagore's 161st birth anniversary. So there was an article associated with that, not really telling us about Rabindranath Tagore, but it is a very interesting theme, important theme for the exam. Now, Rabindranath Tagore, his contributions can be asked in your prelims as well as mains. And when you write for your mains, you're using facts, etc. You're doing the research, which will be helpful for your pre-examination also. Okay, so two questions I'm asking. One is the contribution in terms of his national movement. So overall contributions you have to write down. So that will be an important note. And the other article is about comparison between Rabindranath Tagore's views on nationalism with that of Mahatma Gandhi's. So I saw that there were articles in the Hindu newspaper, plus it has been mentioned in the NCERT also. And there is a long-standing history, when the analysis comes out for the mains paper and they say we don't know from where the art and culture questions had come. Most likely it was from the NCERT sections, which people don't prefer to read because you prefer reading Spectrum 800 pages but miss out the 128 pages that were given in the NCERT, are past 3, 8th NCERT. Okay, so this one. Then we have opinion sections. This is the explainer section. I really don't want to go into the physics part, but yes, some key terms, some key laboratories that have been there in the news that will be helpful for your prelims. Okay, this is the article that's important conceptually. I'm covering it from the point of view of concept of bond yield. So key concepts, how is it affected, how does it move up, how does it come down? So that we'll cover. In fact, it says government said to urge Reserve Bank to help push bond yields. Right, so this will push bond yields lower. Then within the same page, we're moving on to with the overview of the business section, some other important events that are taking place, but I don't want to go into detail of that. So first we have Sri Lanka Prime Minister has finally, he has decided to resign. So we all know in Sri Lanka there is a financial crisis. Currency has come down, inflation is increasing, there is a verge of bankruptcy, things are very, very expensive, there is shortage of supplies. So there was an unrest that was there. In light of that, actually there was opposition from Rajapaksa's own political party. So his own council of ministers had decided to resign. Rajapaksa was still adamant that he wanted to continue and he wanted to tide over this problem, but it seems it didn't work. The violence was increasing and he ultimately decided to quit. Now we have two articles. So one is on the front page itself and the other is on the page number 10. It doesn't tell us much about the future, what is going to happen in the future, but it tells us about the violence or some background information over here. Now we may presume there are two things. One is the already elected members of the legislature, they may form a coalition and form a government, a transition government or whatever. The second thing could be that there can be a fresh elections taking place in Sri Lanka. So let's see how it goes. Next is rupee hits a new low amid dollar outflow. Fine, there are a lot of things. One is there is sell-off in the equity markets. There is a sell-off going on because of the US deciding to increase its Fed rates or Fed hike. That's basically something like Reserve Bank of India, like we have in India, which decides the monetary policy. The same thing we have in the USA also, which we call it as the Federal Bank. So when the Federal Bank of USA decides that they want to increase their interest rate, so people who have invested their money in India or some other emerging economies, they would feel that our money would be safer in USA, our mother country, and now we are getting a reasonable interest. So the money is going out of India and returning back to the USA. In the long run, this will be still less, and they'll come to India. Okay, so one is this. Other thing that is taking place that we need to consider over here is that the rupee is depreciating. The rupee is depreciating, inflation is increasing, the government is not very clear, fiscal deficit is increasing. So what happens is that the value of rupee comes down. Now these people, the investors from, let's say, from USA or other markets, so when they invested in India, so they would have had dollars, they would have spent dollars, converted into rupees, and then bought the bonds of India, bonds, or they would have invested equity. But now when they want to go back and reinvest, ultimately they want dollars only, they want return in dollars. But if the rupee depreciates, they will have to spend more rupees to earn the same amount of dollars. So rupee instability is also a cause of concern, because of which the money is going out. And this is kind of a vicious circle, because as and when the movies, money starts going out, the demand for rupee depreciates, and that also will lead to the downfall of the rupee currency. Okay, next is we will consider sedition law. So there is an affidavit that was given in the Supreme Court that sedition law should be changed. The Parliament should revoke this sedition law. The Chief Justice of India, in the subsequent article, he has also remarked that why do we need such laws which have been used against Mahatma Gandhi and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, because they had written articles that the British had considered seditious. They had expressed their views against the government, opinions critical to the government. So this law that was created in sometime in 1860, so this, they say, that should be revoked. And we have seen that people who are critical of the government, especially against those people, the sedition law has been applied over. We'll do a detailed analysis later, so for today I'm not doing it. So we will have this theme. It's a recurring thing. It will be there in the news, there in the courts. So time and again we'll have more and more arguments. So let's keep that flowing, and we'll have much better opinions in. Okay, so anti-encroachment drive stalled in Delhi, and then we have the High Court links Union Minister's threat. This Lakhimpur Kheri incident that had taken place, that SUV car had mowed down the farmers and the journalists that were there. So this video that became live sometime in October. So then there was this, there's a viral video that had come where a person had said that I can sort down the things in 2 minutes. Nobody knows about my background. Somewhere boasting about their criminal past records. So the court has linked the same with the Lakhimpur Kheri case. Now coming to the mains component, today I'm not really giving you a lot of content because the content is easily available. So Tagore's, or the poet's, 161st birth anniversary, and this is a good time actually to prepare this topic. And there are two things, the two ways which UPSC can ask. One is the contributions of Rabindranath Tagore towards the Indian national movement, and we all know that his main contributions were in the realm of art and culture. So art and culture, his writings, his poetry, his returning back his Nobel Prize, so his knighthood, so doing that with the national movement. So both ways you're preparing art and culture as well as the national movement. Now when I was researching on this, there was article on the Hindu newspaper, that was comparing Gandhiji's views with that of Rabindranath Tagore. So there was this article, so pros and the convergence and divergence, that is similarities of the views of Gandhiji and Rabindranath Tagore, and differences of opinion. So that is being taken up in the Hindu newspaper and also in the NCERTs. And UPSC has a history of asking such questions. Remember the question on Gandhiji and Ambedkar? So such questions can be asked. And do you remember the question on 2016? There was a question on the national movement in West Africa. So, the NCRT, this is in the 8th NCRT. So they compare the Indian national movement. They gave a background and they say that similar movements were taking place in West Africa, and this question was asked in 2016. And all these analysts that we have on the videos, they say that it was a bouncer question. We can't know, we don't know, it's unpredictable. But it is coming straight. It's right under your nose. It's in the NCRT. So we need to prepare the 8th NCRT also. Okay, so these are the two themes. These are important. This is an important debate, and you need to prepare on this. Next, coming to the opinion section, and I don't want to go deep into these articles over here. So we will just a brief background about this. So powering up after the power crisis. Sure, we all know. I think we all had the power cuts. I had a difficult time making videos. Okay. So yeah, the power cuts are taking place, and in the past the government was boasting of that, even our state government also, that there is a power surplus. There is a power surplus, but now we find that there are power cuts. Power cuts are taking place, but few years back you said there is power surplus. How can that be? Is it possible that in the short span of time the demand can increase? Or is it possible that you were not able to track, when I say you, I mean the government, that they were not able to keep a track on the demand side of things? So it says, this article over here, it says that the preceding years, they were not as energy intensive. Now we can consider the lockdowns and the pandemic. So they were not as energy intensive. But in the course of years, the income levels more or less has increased. Then we are having, every one of us, I think, middle class has AC. When we were children, we only had one AC and all of us would sleep in one room. And before that, it was cooler. But now every room may have an AC. So the demand is increasing. Demand for electricity, these are very, very intensive. So demand is increasing. The preceding years were a bit not as energy intensive, so we had less energy intensive economic growth, and add to this the heat wave. So these are certain issues that are mentioned over here. And how can we forget the malpractices or the wrong things because of this unsustainable practices that are going on, that has hampered the health of the distribution companies. There is a video of mine also, my second video on this channel. So I've covered this discom sector, distribution sector. The power is made by, let's say, NTPC, anybody who generates electricity, and ultimately the state electricity board, or from wherever you purchase your electricity. So they transmit the electricity from the generator to the end consumer. So when the government gives subsidies, right, when government gives subsidies or tries to keep the prices of the power low to keep the consumer or the voter happy, so according to the law or the Electricity Act, the government is required to compensate these distribution companies, but that is not happening. So the burden of the cost, let's say the electricity is being produced at 10 rupees and it is being sold at 4 rupees. So the burden of 6 rupees is being borne by the distribution companies, and therefore they are into losses. They are suffering losses over here. And when they're suffering losses, it is difficult for them to run their enterprises, and they are not investing in value addition or better transmission lines, etc. So ultimately this leads to the collapse of the system. Right. So these are certain issues over here. Now naturally, what can be done? This article gives us slightly, it recommends that those people who can afford and who are willing to pay surplus price, so they can purchase electricity, we can get those information and they can purchase electricity from those areas. So that is one suggestion that it has given. But then this goes against the principles of inclusivity. It means whosoever can afford can do it. Otherwise, other people, if they will suffer. So what the government really needs to do is, maybe you may consider that, but it needs to increase the capacity. or let me say they need to augment the capacity by investing in renewables. So renewables, and we know the goals of 2030 and 2070 carbon neutral, 2030 50% of our electricity should be via the renewables, and to do that we need to create a mechanism of electricity storage also, so large scale grid storage. So these are certain steps that can be taken. Further, we need to reform the regulatory system. We need to better assess the demand side of things. And one more thing, one thing that I missed over here, that more emphasis has been given on electrification. So naturally, more households have been covered. Sehaj Har Ghar Bijli Yojana. So again, that will again lead to the increase in the demand. Next article is about India-German ties. I'm covering this in brief because more or less kind of many things are repetitive over here. Okay, so Germany, India. So, when the Ukraine war has taken place, Ukraine crisis over here, so Germany, the Western European countries plus America, the West, they want India to take a strong stand at the United Nations, but they are deciding to abstain from voting. So kind of in consonance with Moscow, Russia. Then they are continuing with increasing their engagement. They are investing in the relations so that they are able to get the cheap crude. Naturally, India will uphold its national interest. In fact, that holds true for the Germany itself. Germany, which is continuing to get crude or natural gas from Russia, right? So they were expecting that India would take a stance that is against Moscow, or they will side with the European countries over here, which is not happening. And now that both of them are together, but we don't really know because media interaction has been quite minimized over here. So it seems that the status quo will remain as such, and they also expected that since India is a democratic country and India is a leading emerging world power, India would be like to be more assertive. But here again, this idea of this democratic dividend, that is India will uphold the values of democracy in other places, there's also this credential seems a bit it seems a bit wrong. The assessment over here of India seems a bit wrong because within India also within India also sometimes we feel that the democratic credentials are being minimized, at least according to some indicators. Freedom of press index, democracy index, all that. And even when we come to engage with the other countries in the neighborhood, let's say our engagement with Myanmar. So initially our stance was that we will only engage with democratic government, but now there has been a military coup, so we are engaging with their military leadership, the Myanmar's Janta. Our stance has changed. In fact, even with Afghanistan, we say that we don't want to deal with the Taliban, but our stance is changing over there also. At least there seems to be a kind of shift. So we are not as rigid or we're really not interested in promoting the democratic credentials in other parts. It's more like a diplomatic exercise. Right, so this is there. So it seems the assessment is a bit wrong over here. They need to reassess. And so that is the dissonance in the India-German ties. Now here there is a mention from Prelims perspective towards this direction, the holding of the 6th India-Germany intergovernmental consultation. Fine, India-German consultation, this is a biennial, right? That means it is happening once in 2 years. And this concerns focusing on the business side of things, economic engagement, intensifying the economic engagement, and it is seen as an important pillar of the strategic partnership between the two countries. So this was brought into force in 2000. And within this, they are looking at the convergence of issues of economics, technology, climate change. So these are seen as low-hanging fruits where they can work upon and then build on their relationship. So this remains the crux of the Indian approach. And I think I'd like to add something more. with India has this demand for the fighter planes. The Rafale deal was supposed to be a lot more than buying 36 aircrafts. So aircrafts, we need high value aircrafts, and we need submarines. So it is estimated around 50,000 crores worth of contract is pending. So Germany has an interest over there also. And we are witnessing that Germany has been more than willing in providing us some critical technologies, especially associated in the realm of power distribution, or that helps us fight the climate change, like the smart grids, etc. Right, so maybe both are related. So, but in this article we have it till here only. And yes, we do have a reference that Germany invited India to the G7 summit that will take place in June this year, and your exam is also in June, so keep that in mind. Okay, so G7, India has been invited. Now this reflects India's rise in the stature. It reflects that the G7 wants to have intensified relations with India. G7 is all the developed countries over here. Okay, and this also indicates, and this is an important line, it is a certainly a pointer to the emerging multipolarity in the international system. That is, there is no one center of power like it was during the time of the post-Cold War era, where we were having a bipolar world, Russia and USA. Then a unipolar world after the decline of the USSR. So USSR had come down. Now we are talking about a multipolar world. That is, there is no one center of power, but there is this USA, there is this China, Russia, India. India is also emerging in its stature. So that way. So multipolar world. Okay. Now the importance of immigrants. This is the title of this opinion section over here. So this article tells us immigrants, I hope you know, immigrants are people who go out of a country and start working elsewhere. So it could be, let's say, Bahrain, like this Arabian countries, Arabian or this Middle East countries, or it could be these like USA sector. So anybody from India or any country goes outside. So that person is referred to as immigrants. And then there is immigrants. So I is used. So that is anybody who's coming to our country to work. Okay. So importance of immigrants, anybody who's going out of a country. So what is that importance of that person? Naturally, when somebody goes outside of a country, that person would have his family in India. So family or anything. So they would be sending whatever the earnings that they are getting, part of it, they would be sending it back. And this we call it as remittances. So India has a high number of migrants that is living in different parts of the world over here, and it is believed that there are about 2.5 million workers from India who move to different parts of the world on employment visas. So 25, how much is that? Around 25 lakhs. Okay. And the remittances that is coming to India, according to the World Bank Group, the money that is coming, it is around 87 billion, which remains the highest. China is 53, Mexico is 53 billion. So India is way ahead of other countries, and this is a sizable number. So this is one gain that is coming to India. The other thing is that Indian economy is not able to create adequate amount of jobs. There is a lot of youthful population. So this using of this emigration, so this could be seen as a good hedging strategy. We are not able to create the jobs, so might as well send them elsewhere, and they will return some money to us, so remittances, and that will lead to the capital creation of the country, and then it can be reinvested in the economic growth. Okay, so this is there. So this is the importance, this is the benefit of emigration. Now here there is a reference of, it just mentions, can the Philippines model of promoting labor mobility may be replicated in India? Now this article does not tell us what Philippines model is, but definitely it's something very good, and it tells us about certain things that the government wants to do. So more or less the same features will be part of it. Okay. So Philippines model is there, we get to know about this, and it tells us about one thing, that if we are sending our immigrants, we have to be concerned about their safety and their welfare or well-being of the migrants. Second thing is, let's say a crisis had taken place, like this something happens in Bahrain or something happens in Iraq, then we have to find some of the mission, or something like in Ukraine also. So getting them back, or some sort of fraud is taking place, like there are these recruitment agencies, so them engaging in wrongful conduct, so that needs to be regulated. Okay. Then we have many of our population, immigrant population, is unskilled workforce, so low skilled and semi-skilled. And for instance, 90% of Indian migrants who live in GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council. So check which of the countries are not part of the GCC, that is important. Iran will not be part of this. Okay. So these unskilled workers, their welfare, their well-being is again something that the government needs to work upon. So we have safety, welfare, recruitment, right? So these are things that needs to be looked into. Now with that in mind, the government has proposed a bill, that is the Immigration Bill 2021. And what are the things that they are looking at? It is looking at integrating immigration management and streamlining the welfare of immigrant workers. The first thing. Then the workers, especially those who are coming under this immigration check required category, ECR category. Now we should know what is this ECR category. ECR category is immigrants who are people who are till 10th, who are qualified till the 10th class, who have not passed the 10th class examination. So for those people, naturally they are low skilled and semi-skilled workers. So those people compulsory have to be registered. So people in the ECR category have to be registered over here. Now when they are being registered, it will create a database. So government will have a greater clarity who all person are there, how did they go. So they will know, they have every single data, and they can do whatever corrective steps that are required to be taken. If anybody has a grievance, that can be done, all of that. Okay. Now, who will regulate all of this, that these all activities are taking place? So for that, there will be an immigration management authority. So these are certain things that the government wants to do via the immigration bill. And further it says that these workers who are identified, they will be trained. So skill upgradation should be taking place. They should be trained, and there should be something like a pre-departure orientation, giving them some idea about where they can stay, the laws of that country, some basic idea that will be given over there. Okay, so these are the things. Now consider this, that we are looking at this free trade agreements with other countries of the world. Now I'm going beyond the article. So one of our focus is export of labor. Export of labor. And it also means export of services. For export of services, you want free movement of people, and we have surplus people. And other countries like European Union, EU, India FTA, or EU RCEP FTA, India RCEP FTA. These are a major. This is a major stumbling block over here. So this is actually one of our important policies of immigrant policy, that is to skill the workers and make them job ready in other countries. Okay, next article, the Stanton model of particle physics gets a jolt. Now you don't get overwhelmed with the terms that we're going to come across. We're not really interested in that. We just need a basic idea, nothing more. So not really the physics. Okay. So there is this laboratory in USA, Collider Detector Fermilab, right? So this laboratory made a measurement of a subatomic particle known as W boson. So this is a subatomic particle. So this particle, when the measurements were taken place, it did not match the estimates from the standard model of particle physics, the normal physics, right? So it didn't measure that. So normally the measurements that we have estimated over the years, it didn't match. And the boson was first found in 1983 at the CERN laboratory. Now see, the things that I'm underlining over here, these are important. Where are these laboratories located? You should read more about them for your prelims. Okay. So this was identified. So some way of maybe identifying the mass would have been seen by them. So this does not match the calculations that were done previously. Now the question arises, what is the standard model of elementary particle physics? So standard model of particle physics, elementary particle physics, it describes the particles of matters and their interaction. It is concerned with all the particles that are there and some fundamental forces of nature and their interaction. So these are electromagnetic force, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear, gravitational interaction. So on these bases, it believes that all of them, if we take them together, they are interrelated, and somewhere we can put them in an equation form. We can bring them together basically. So all of them should give us some sort of a consistency in the measurement. So elementary particle of physics as being connected by mathematical symmetries just as an object and its mirror image. They are mathematical groups generated by, I think forget that, it will confuse you more. Okay. So these forces are related, they have effect of one of the other, and more or less this will provide some sort of a consistency in the measurement. Okay, so by this we got some measurement of W boson which does not match the CDF laboratory, and this could be significant if this if the standard model of particle physics is proven wrong by these new developments, then it would have huge repercussions in the study of physics. We will have to make significant changes over here. Now there is a problem with this model of physics is that it omits certain forces like gravity. It doesn't include the description of the dark matter. So what is the impact of the dark matter? So that is not taken into consideration by this. Okay. Now we really don't know much beyond this. It's only that these findings that have taken place, they would have to be reconfirmed in other laboratories like the Large Hadron Collider that is located in the CERN. So that will provide us a greater clarity. Okay. Now this is done. Now there is a term that is mentioned over here, that is eigenstates. So eigenstates is nothing but it is the characteristics. So characteristics of boson, some basic elements of all the subatomic particles, they have been referred to as eigenstates. So you read closely over here. So fundamental particles which are represented by the characteristic eigenstates, right? So these are nothing but characteristics, nature or attributes or some qualities of certain of these subatomic particles. Next article, China's intent is to keep boundary issue alive. Two things. One is they are talking about this boundary issue. I think we get that. The other thing that the article is telling us is he's focusing upon some important lessons from Russia-Ukraine war. And what he's inferred is that conventional war is still a threat. It is still relevant. People had started saying that proxy war and other means of war are there, or the modern day war would be short and swift. But we find that the modern day war could be lengthy as well, as it is happening in Ukraine. Then it has drawn attention back to the issue of being self-reliant. So being self-reliant is very important. Ukraine wasn't self-reliant, so that was a problem. And we should also have a strong deterrence, so that countries which are much powerful like China, etc., we can have a strong deterrence and stop them. Okay. So for that we need to have Atmanirbharta, and our defense forces, the government through the Defense Acquisition Council for this Make in India programs, they are focusing on Atmanirbharta in the defense sector, or the indigenization of the defense manufacturing. Then aspect of non-contact or non-kinetic warfare. So that he says it is loud and clear. And what is that? He says non-contact is cyber domain. So cyber warfare, information warfare, creating a propaganda, creating a narrative. So Ukraine has been able to create a narrative against Russia, and that is being seen in the worldwide, right? So creating a narrative so that the world responds appropriately. So that is again very, very important. Now there is a mention over here with reference to the statement of General Manoj Pandey, where he says we need to have a whole of nation approach. The grammar thing is not making much sense, but what we need is in the country is a whole of nation approach, and in the military domain this is to prevent. So whole of nation approach, I would understand, is that we should not just look at the military side of things, that military is to fight a war, but we should look at it more holistically. So we have the military, we have the whole government apparatus like external affairs ministry, so diplomacy, media and press, the IT side of things, cyber warfare. So whole of nation approach. So that is my interpretation over here. This is important, this is interesting. Government said to urge Reserve Bank to help push bond yields lower. Now before I go ahead, just a brief background about the bonds. So when, let's say, the government wants to raise money. Now bonds can be issued by anybody, but let's say the government wants to raise money. So government would issue bonds to the investor. Investor could be me, it could be the companies, corporate sector, whosoever. So government would issue bonds, and these bonds would be given to the investor, and naturally these would have to be bought for some payment. So the government gets money in return. Okay. Now that is there. Now when we look at the bond, let's say bond is there, and the bond's value is, face value of the bond is rupees 1000. That is on the paper, of that thing, the value that is written, that this bond is worth rupees 1000. And on this, you will get a interest of, or the coupon rate of this bond is, let's say, 5%. Is this clear? We have the bond whose face value, that is like your rupee currency, your paper currency that you have, so there is a value that is written. But that doesn't mean, okay, we'll be till here only. So the bond is there, whose value that is mentioned on the piece of paper is rupees 1000, and the coupon rate is 5%. That is, one will get a fixed interest of 5% on this value over here. I think that comes to 50 rupees, so 1050. Okay. Now it is not necessary that now I am coming to the concept of yields. Now it is not necessary that the return that you are getting is just the coupon rate. The actual return that you are getting is actually the yields, bond yields. And when we look at this, it is not necessary for anybody that they have to buy. If it is a 1000 rupee bond over here, you will be buying it at 1000 rupees. What is the real market value of this bond? Market value of this bond over here. It could be bought at rupees 2000 also. This bond whose face value is 1000 could be bought at 2000. It could be also bought at 500 rupees at a lower value. This is a bond whose face value of 1000 rupees, but at the market it is available at a much lower rate. Clear? Okay. So when somebody goes, let's say when the value of this bond has come down, value of the market value of the bond whose face value has come down, then in that case the return that one is getting on this bond, so one is the coupon, this return over here, and when one sells this to the, like in the first stage, the government has bought this, investor has bought this bond. Now investor goes back to the government and says that please return me the money. So but the bond value is 1000 rupees. So we take a combined picture over here, and that tells us about the yield. So the bond was taken at 500 rupees, but its face value over here is much higher. So the government ultimately will give it at the face value. Okay, so this is the thing. Now, because of inflation and because of the sellouts, because of the US Fed hike also, so the money that was there parked in the Indian bonds, because Indian bonds were getting good returns, this has been going out back into USA and other countries. Naturally, the market value of the bond is coming down. So when the market value of the bond is coming down, the return that the yield is actually coming high. So it is inversely proportional. So yield is increasing, the return is increasing over here. And it is the yield, the yield is coming high because of this, because the market value of the bond is coming down. So this is a cause of concern over here. Okay, so this is going down, and the government is, the investors are selling their bonds, one on the issue of this Fed hike. The other issue is the instability in the Indian economy, be it with reference to the depreciation of the currency. So rupee is depreciating, I explained in the first this thing. So that is taking place, the issues of fiscal stability, so all of that. So they feel it is better to exit the Indian market and sell the Indian bonds. But as a result of this, the yield is increasing. And the government is one of the greatest borrowers to finance the fiscal deficit. They borrow money, and one of the great source of borrowing money is the bonds. But the yield on the bond is increasing because the market price has come down. So that is what the government is saying. Please take measures so that the bond yields are lowered. That is, the market price of the bond is maintained. So this is it. So for that, it is recommending that they must take open market operations, or they must buy the bonds. So when they buy the bonds, naturally there will be reduction in the number of bonds that are there in the market. So the demand or the willingness of the people to buy the bonds will automatically increase. So that will decrease the yield. Okay. So this article is done. Then LIC IPO was there. So this has been subscribed to 2.95 times. And NTPC is taking measures to import additional coal, and GOIL to hold meet on high cotton prices. So cotton prices have been increasing. Okay then, so this concludes our daily news analysis. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. And if this thing is not clear, I'll make a separate video on this. So this was in the newspaper with that constraints. I'll make it more detailed eventually. So bye bye, take care and all the best.